Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections. And today we have a very interesting player. And he is one Evan Engram, 6'3", 240 pounds, 27 years old next week. He's on the last year of his rookie contract. The fifth year option was extended on him. It's the last year. And this is such a tough one because it has been an up and down career for Evan Engram so far. You know, the first round pick. The last first round pick by Jerry Reese, one of the last Jerry Reese members on the team, him, Shep, and like maybe two other players. He's coming off of a Pro Bowl year, and if you ask people if he replicated last year, people would say it was a disaster. So it's so frustrating with Evan Engram. Like, he is the most frustrating player on this team because like he's not a guy you hate because like he seems like a hardworking guy, humble. Like, he's not full of himself. Like, he's never like going after people. Seems like a good dude. But those damn drops just have been brutal. Like, brutal, brutal, brutal.
Complicated. Mysterious. The most interesting man in the world, Evan Engram. Yeah, great guy. He is a great guy. He's a great guy. He has a great backstory. It's always he's a good talker. It's always great to hear, whenever his talk, him talking and his perspective on things. But last year, as a football player, frustrating is a nice word certainly to describe it. Bobby Skinner. A Pro Football Reference gives him credit for 6 interceptions when targeted, with the 55 QB rating when targeted as well. I think 6 interceptions when targeted is generous. I think at one point I counted at least 10 or 11 turnovers where Evan Engram was involved. Not saying that all of them were his fault, but 10 or 11 where he was just simply involved, and the correlation of him being associated with bad offensive play and bad turnovers, that was just a reality for him last year. But he does have the talent. He does have all the potential in the world. And, there does come a point where we've been saying this for years. We have to force a player to look in the mirror. And it's like, well, is it the system or is it Evan Engram? We're going to find it out this year because contract year, and will he be extended? Will he not be extended? Et cetera, et cetera. So, Bobby Skinner, give me some more on Evan Engram.
Well, let's go through the turnovers, because the turnovers that were his fault. You had the Chicago slip and bobble, where it's like Jones throws it, like he slips on the break of the route, slips, the ball gets bobbled up, and someone behind gets an interception. That's one. San Francisco, the reverse. It hits his hands. It could have been a better pitch, but when a ball is being tossed, it is very soft. You should be able to grab it when you get both those hands on it. That's 2. Philly, he had that drop on third down. Remember, it was a hard pass by Daniel Jones, but it was on the target, on the money. He knew it was coming. What didn't come out of nowhere? Dropped interception. That's 3. I don't even want to count this one as a turnover, but that game, the drop that would have essentially won the Giants the division at the end of the game. But we're at 3 turnovers right now. Cincinnati, fumble. Seattle, hit it right in the hands, pops it up, interception, 5. And then the last one of the year, where Daniel Jones at one point, for the guy that people were like, oh, he just turns over the ball so much, he was the QB who had the longest pass attempt streak in the NFL without an interception. At that point, no QB in the NFL had a longer passing streak without an interception than Daniel Jones until he throws the ball beautifully to Evan Engram. He pops it up. A Dallas safety gets an interception. So like we could be coming into this year, and a fun Daniel Jones talking point would be like, no QB has a longer streak right now than Daniel Jones active. But we don't, because Evan Engram caused 6 turnovers that were directly his fault. Where it's like, all right, who do we blame on the turnover? It was Evan Engram. 6 different times in a 16-game season for someone not a quarterback.
Yeah, and the advanced stats of EPA, expected points added. If you've listened to the show a lot, you know what I'm about to say. And this was the stat that kind of perfectly described Evan Ingram's 2020, unfortunately. But there was no other target, no other skill position player that was targeted in the NFL that harmed his team and had such a negative expected points added as Evan Engram did. And that is where we come from, and now we move to 2021, where we say that was so catastrophically, historically bad that there is little to no way that he could repeat how bad it was in 2020 to 2021, right?
Yeah, because even if he's not good, you just it's impossible to replicate those types of turnovers. It's impossible. And again, like you mentioned, being targeted, that's not always his fault. Like the Fred Warner interception versus San Fran, that wasn't Evan Ingram's fault at all. The TJ Watt interception versus Pittsburgh, like that wasn't Evan Ingram's fault at all. So, but at the same time, it's like, well, when you get a full season sample size, like that means something.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk to the point of the idea. It's like, well, it's scheme. Because I think the idea that like, oh, someone's just got to figure out how to use Evan Ingram, I feel like that's a bad talking point. Because if you look at him with Shermer, he had really good numbers. If you look at especially 2018 when Odell left, like those last 4 games, like Ingram looked really good. And then the start of 2019, the first 5 games, and then he got injured after that, he had 33 catches, 373 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I know it doesn't mean that he would keep it up at a 16-game rate, but just to kind of show you like what that would look like at a 16-game season, it's 106 catches and 1,200 yards. Like he was balling out, and then he got hurt, and the issue was that he got hurt. So and what did Shermer do? He used them on crossers, vertically some, but a lot on just crossing routes. But so the point of like, oh, no one's used Evan Ingram correctly is a bad one. But the fact that Jason Garrett didn't use him correctly is 100% correct.
Yeah, and here's why. So Evan Ingram received 94 of his 109 targets from less than 15 air yards last year. That's a lot. That is a lot. That's a lot of targets that he did receive. Granted, the Giants' skill position players was nothing to really run home about, and he was arguably the most talented skill position player last year, so targeting him was kind of necessary. Before week 7, Evan Ingram's yards before the catch was 3.7, a career low when Garrett was trying to use him like Jason Witten. So 3.7 yards before the catch. He ended the season with a career high 5.8 yards before the catch. He was targeted deep down the field or deeper down the field towards the second half of the season. And really, so if you look at the splits between the first half of the season and second half of the season, Pro Football Reference doesn't do this. I just kind of calculated this on my own. You have to figure that his yards before the catch towards the second half of the season, it had to be more than 5.8 for it to dramatically increase from 3.7 to 5.8. So here's my outlook on Evan Ingram in 2021. He is not going to be your stereotypical, prototypical tight end. Because you also have to include this as well, where Engram, every single Evan Ingram 20-plus yard play came when he was lined up out wide, kind of like as the pseudo wide receiver in 11 personnel, and not with his hand in the ground. Not a single play of 20-plus yards Evan Ingram had when his hand was lined up in the ground. So Evan Ingram is never going to be this prototypical, stereotypical tight end like a Kittle, like a Kelsey, because also you have to think about his blocking limitations as well. But he is an option vertically. He's not a great route runner, but he's a big body. His straight line speed is there, and if he can catch the ball and get the ball in his hands and he can get some sort of separation, then he's deadly. So a guy that can get 60 catches, maybe 50, somewhere in that range, with not as much targets, I'm 100% for that, where Evan Ingram is a situational target that is a weapon kind of down the field for us.
Exactly. And one, just using it like, not making him the primary read in the offense a ton, which a lot comes with that stick concept, where the tight end is the prime. You're not even reading the tight end, you're reading the linebackers, but essentially the tight end becomes like the primary read in those type of plays. But also like Kyle Rudolph's addition means I put him around 60% of the reps.
Yep.
So that means, one, you got reps where it's just Evan Ingram out there. Cool. You got reps where it's Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram out there. But also that means taking him off the field at times where it's Kyle Rudolph and Caden Smith out there. Okay? Like that's what it means at times. Put his reps around 60%. Stop putting him in there for 85% of the game. Let him be a situational player. And 60% is still a ton, So when I say situational, it doesn't mean he's a gadget player, but just know when you're using him. And now that you have Kyle Rudolph and you have Caden Smith, who's a solid backup, well, guess what? We can run 2 tight end sets without having a bad blocking tight end out there. Because Ingram's gotten a little better as his career's gone at blocking, and you'll find reps of him like, wow, look at Ingram blocking on this play. But at the end of the day, he's never going to be a good blocker. And the Giants, who maybe want to run a little outside zone, which is a very hard scheme to run. When it's ran well, it's very hard to stop, but it's very hard to run. And part of it is just blocking. Like, can your tackles and your tight ends make those blocks? And Evan Ingram will never be able to make those blocks.
And Joe Judge preaches versatility, so it's a little mind-boggling that the Giants organization's love for Evan Ingram doesn't do a lot well, but the thing that he does do well, he does it very well. So I don't mean to just crap on Evan Ingram, this entire PPP. That's not really the focus of these. And it is a frustrating conversation of like, we're now how many years into his NFL career, and we're still having a conversation on how to use Evan Ingram. And I know you were talking about with Shermer how he kind of used him right, but still, it has been an every year conversation on how to use this guy. He's got to flat out perform better, Bobby, himself. But what do we actually expect from him? Because if he's not going to be a guy that's going to block, and if he's not going to be a guy that's going to run routes well in the intermediate part of the field, they have no choice but to decrease his snaps unless they want the same mistakes to repeat from last year.
Here's my last point on Evan Ingram. I think he can have a good season, but I'm just not banking on it anymore. I'm not banking on a good season from Evan Ingram. Like he kind of get, like he's a very, like every training camp, we get the training camp highlights, like Evan Ingram's the king of those. But I'm sorry, I'm not banking on it until I see it happen. I want him to be consistent, and even if he has a good couple games, will we celebrate it? Absolutely. But I'm not being like, oh wow, Evan Ingram is the tight end we always wanted to be. Put together for a full season, and stay healthy for a full season. Like injuries were his issue before this year.
Yeah.
He missed 8 games in 2019, 5 in 2018, and then 1 game as a rookie. The health has always been the issue with Evan Ingram. He had some drops, but drops weren't like a huge major issue for him coming into this year. It's like we knew he didn't have the greatest hands. He was never going to be a Kyle Rudolph type, but his drops weren't like killer.
Yeah.
And he stays healthy, and then they become killer. So,
lo and behold, right?
Are you rooting for the guys in blue, Justin?
I'm rooting for the guys in blue. Root for Evan Ingram. I know he's not necessarily everybody's favorite, but also at the same time, I do feel he is everybody's darling. But root for the guys in blue. Root for Evan Ingram. Go out, have a good year. Get a contract extension, brother.
We appreciate you guys. We'll save contract. Yeah.
Go on, prove it.
Play good enough to get a contract. All right, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. Until then, let's go Big Blue.